Despite a 13-point deficit, Miami had a monster third quarter and took care of business yet again, winning on the road in game one for a third time in this postseason. It was the return of playoff Jimmy and a total team effort that led to a big-time win that shows this team just doesn't know how to quit, regardless of the opponent. We break down the game, the performances that stood out, and answer your questions on today's playoff edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. However, you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil, recording this after the Heat beat the Celtics 123-116 to take game one, steal home court advantage in these Eastern Conference Finals. They come back from 14 points down, get a big Jimmy Butler game. They shoot 52% on their three-pointers, and they've now won the first game on the road in every series in these playoffs. And David, of course, we know how each of those previous series have ended. The Celtics looked like they had things figured out early in this one, but this is a team in the Heat that makes you beat them. They're not going to just roll over. We've seen that too many times. And the Heat came out in the second half and outscored the Celtics in a big third quarter, 46-25 in that third quarter. They do not relinquish the lead after that, and they win the game. Where do you want to start with this one, David? It kind of feels like we should start with Jimmy Butler, who looked good on that right ankle.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest factor going into the series is what version of Jimmy Butler you'd get, whether it was a more effective but passive one the way that we saw in the last three games of the Knicks series, last four games, the Knicks series after he injured his ankle, or was it closer to the version that we saw against the Milwaukee Bucks? And I'd say, based on this one game at least, it was much more like the performer that we saw against the Milwaukee Bucks, attacking, finding his jump shot, searching out mismatches, looking for either Peyton Pritchard or Malcolm Brogdon, Derek White, anybody but Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown, although he was more than willing to attack them if necessary, but just hunting those mismatches, trying to find those opportunities, had the lift on his jumper, was nailing it. His mid-range jumper game was phenomenal. I think Cooper Moorhead of the Miami Heat tweeted out something that was a season high in terms of Jimmy Butler mid-range jumpers, and you could tell he was just very, very effective. And it looked like he was comfortable doing so whenever he had a little bit of space, or even when he did it, let's be honest. He was more than willing and capable of taking that shot. Really, really strong game. Had some really big steals in the fourth quarter when it looked like Boston might try to mount a comeback after Miami had somehow built a double-digit lead. Just a phenomenal performance from Jimmy Butler, again, indicating that he is the best player in this series, if not the best player in the playoffs altogether.
Going back to that mid-range stuff, he had like 16 or 17 of his 25 field goal attempts in this one were mid-range jumpers. He made a couple of three-pointers in this one. Yes. He did get to the basket a little bit, but those were more like offensive rebounds and stuff. Like He was, like you were saying, pick and roll, get the mismatch, whether it was Peyton Pritchard or Malcolm Brogdon or Marcus Smart, or even there was one against Robert Williams, where he was like, all right, like this guy's too slow to keep up with me. This guy's too small to guard me. And he just got to that like left side of the floor baseline jumper, which I'm like watching this Heat game, David, and I'm watching Jimmy Butler make these baseline jumpers, and it's like his patented shot right now. And I'm like, is he going to be more known for this baseline jumper in Heat history than Udonis Haslem at some point, the way that he's making these in these high stakes games? It was the lift when he's getting to that baseline. We didn't really see that against the Knicks. He's obviously playing every other night. He hurt his ankle in that first game against New York. He gets 4 days off going into the Celtics game, and I think he really needed it because he looked like he had that lift. He made a number of cross-court passes, which are really difficult to make if you're not getting that kind of lift on your jumps and all that kind of stuff. So he looked healthy. You said it, and I think it's perfect. This was the big question we had going into the series. Was it going to be Milwaukee Jimmy Butler? Was it going to be New York Jimmy Butler? And it was the Milwaukee Bucks version, the predatorial wing that Jimmy Butler can be. Part of that is based on the way that the Celtics were guarding him. They were basically happy to go single coverage. They were happy to switch, and Butler took advantage of that, where the Knicks were mostly throwing their double teams at Jimmy Butler. But if this is the way the Celtics are going to guard Jimmy Butler is saying flatly, okay, bring it on. You want me to beat you? I'll beat you. And not to say that he did it alone. The Heat shot 52% from 3-point range. Bam Adebayo had 20 points. Like there was Kyle Lowry had 13 points in that huge third quarter that we mentioned before. Or was it the second quarter? Second quarter.
He had in the second quarter,
points. Yeah. And to kind of basically keep Miami in that game to the degree that they were in the game in the first half. But it was Jimmy Butler taking them down at the end. It kind of reminded me of like a LeBron James game a little bit, where a classic LeBron game where, he's kind of getting his, it's not like he wasn't doing anything for 3 quarters. He was kind of patiently picking his spots and all that. And in the fourth quarter, he just decided to take over.
Yeah. Pretty steady, fluid, never forced, never rushed. He didn't look like he was the world beater, perhaps, that we saw in some of the other performances, particularly against the Bucks, but more than competent and just very measured. It didn't seem like at any point, like there were a couple possessions, because they're going to happen over the course of the game, where it was a late shot clock situation and he felt a little rushed. But even then, in the fourth quarter, he wound up hitting that kind of I don't even know what to call that jumper that he took for the 3-pointer, where he kind of had to pull up and just had his knees tucked back behind him. It was just like he was trying to get as much lift as possible. Can the 3, and I think he even surprised himself. But hey, when you got it going, I like the LeBron comparison, because he also had 7 assists in the game,
6 steals.
6 steals. Yeah.
All of them like Champ Bailey interceptions. Like it just,
oh, you're going to make that pass? I've seen that before. I'll go ahead and tip it. Go ahead and run off.
He had one spinning around like Odell Beckham catch in the middle of the lane off of, I think, a Jayson Tatum pass. Can I come in with a hot take real quick?
Do it.
I don't think it was that good of a Jimmy Butler game. I think this could have been way better.
Yeah,
he missed a number
really good game
of makeable jumpers in the paint. Like a number. Yeah. I'll give you the number. Instead of just saying a number, I have the shot chart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I count 8 jumpers in the paint, non-restricted area, paint jumpers that Jimmy Butler was making against the Milwaukee Bucks. And he missed a number of them in pretty open ones against the Boston Celtics in this one. This game could have easily went from this could have been a 40-plus point game for Jimmy Butler pretty easily if he just makes some more of these jumpers that he usually makes. Sure. I think if Boston's going to go about guarding Jimmy Butler in this way, there is another better Jimmy Butler game coming in this series.
Well, we talked about it in our preview with Locked On Celtics. Maybe that was part of the design, or at least a certain thought process. Like, let Jimmy get his and force everybody to beat you. Today, everybody else did beat you. Like, not only was Jimmy
got his, and everybody else beat you.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's part of why Miami is here, is that they've gotten these kind of contributions consistently, throughout the playoffs, and not consistently to say like everybody's going to step on every night, but you're going to get a Gabe Vincent game. He was great, especially in the fourth quarter. Kevin Love had that big third quarter, knocking down a number of big shots there. Kyle Lowry, as you pointed out early, in the second quarter. Caleb Martin stepping up. He hit a 3. One of those passes that Jimmy made when the defense collapsed him in the paint was to whip it around almost like a cross-court pass to a wide-open Caleb in the corner. He wound up nailing the 3-court.
Yeah, he was making the right passes. Like, Jimmy wasn't like forcing it really at any point. There was a couple of jumpers where he did, but for the most part, he wasn't really forcing it. He was taking what Boston gave him, and they gave him a lot. I don't think they can afford to give him that much. The Miami Heat get a lot of credit for hanging in and just not dying, right? But this is also, if you're a Celtics fan, kind of your worst case scenario is, oh man, the Heat made like one big run in that third quarter and we got shook and we just never could really get back into the game, where that didn't happen for the Heat, right? The Celtics were the team early in the first half that made the run, and the Heat were not shaken, right? They came back, they battled back. So I know we're going to get to credit cookies in the next segment. I want to do that. And I want to loop back before we get to credit cookies on that thing you just said, Jimmy Butler being the best player in this series over Jayson Tatum. I think that's worth exploring a little bit, even after one game. We're going to do that next. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Sports. For a championship, eBay Motors, for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you get your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop on eBay Motors with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to
to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions do apply.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every day, we're going to be back on Saturday morning with our recap of Game 2. We're going to get into the kitchen, whip up some credit cookies in a minute, David. But before we do that, want to just kind of loop back around to something that you said, and I think it's worth exploring. Jimmy Butler being the best player in this series against Jayson Tatum. I don't think it's debatable. And it feels like it's a debate on the show.
I'll offer
right?
it.
It's a debate.
I'll offer the debate if it's necessary. Jayson Tatum,
based on what we've seen in these playoffs, it's not debatable. Like, it's just not. It's flat. It's like if you want to take Jayson Tatum and his career as a whole, and Jimmy Butler's career as a whole, and consider Jayson Tatum's ceiling and all these things, like I'll hear you. But based on the sample of this postseason, we were, before Game 7 when he scored 51 points against the Sixers, we were kind of wondering what was wrong with Jayson Tatum these playoffs. Yeah. With Jimmy Butler, we were talking about him in Michael Jordan terms, in making one of the best, in the first round, one of the greatest series we've ever seen. Maybe if we were debating whether or not it was the greatest series we've ever seen, with all the context, considering it was against the number 1 seed.
Certainly up there.
That's the conversation we're having with Jimmy Butler, and we're wondering if Jayson Tatum is even that guy for most of these playoffs. And tonight, Jimmy Butler was the guy when they need him in the fourth quarter, and then Jayson Tatum kind of just disappeared.
Yeah. He was out for a long stretch of that fourth quarter there too. So shout out Joe Mazzulla for that head scratcher. But even when he did bring him in, it did not look like Tatum had it going. Hunting for fouls a little bit more than hunting for his shot, not really trying to find the right opportunity. A couple of times when he was either stripped clean or he made a bad pass, he kind of just looked around, even had that inexplicable travel when he put the ball down and tried to get his shot going after Max Strus wound up closing out, I think, on a 3-point attempt when he was out on the perimeter as the shot clock was expiring. A little bit of a head scratcher again for Tatum, who has been really, really solid. I know Celtics fans will come at us, but so be it. They're going to find some fault in everything we say anyway.
What do we say wrong with Tatum?
For saying that Butler is the better player than Tatum.
I think Celtics fans would agree with you. I think Celtics fans are feeling this way. That's what I'm talking about right now. Like, they're frustrated with Jayson Tatum.
And I think the temperament of Jimmy Butler, like one of the big X factors, and I talked about this in our preview, is that Jimmy Butler is just a more inspirational player. We talk to these players, we hear from them all the time. Jimmy leads the way. He's the guy. He sets the bar. When we see 22 play this way, we know we always have a chance to win. God damn it, they're right. Like, at some point, you just have to.
I don't know who that guy is. I'm not burying Boston. I don't really know who that guy is for Boston, and that's a question that's not just a game.
Jaylen Brown was more effective. I think he was more dangerous, if anything, than Tatum.
Brown had 22 points on 21 shots, and Tatum had 30 points on 17 shots. He got to the free throw line way more than Jaylen Brown did. Jaylen Brown only took one trip to the foul line. But I'm not saying it was a bad Jayson Tatum game. I'm just saying, like, when we're talking about Jimmy kind of pacing himself and picking his spots in three quarters and taking over in the fourth, under the pressure. That's the formula. With Tatum, it's sort of the opposite, right? Like, he got a bunch of those points. He led Boston to a 13, 14-point lead, whatever it was. And he was a big reason for that, right? He was making a ton of shots early on, and I didn't think that the Heat had an answer for him. They started with Jimmy Butler on Jayson Tatum. They shuffled through a few different other kinds of matchups, depending on the rotation and the lineups that they had. And then he just he just didn't touch the ball for like 3 straight minutes in the fourth quarter. It was weird. But let's just go. Let's get into this kitchen.
Before we get into the cookies, what's the big switch, if anything, that you think the Celtics might make? Like we talked about, one of the things going into the series is who balks first, right? Who makes the change right away? And I think it's obvious that Boston needs to do something, although I guess they could probably say, well, maybe
I would stick with that starting lineup. I would be, if I'm Boston.
They're not going Derek White, right? Or Brogdon starting.
No, I'm pressuring the paint. That's what they scored 40 points in the paint in the first half. Like, if I'm Boston, I'm like, that's the formula. Yeah. Like, Robert Williams was awesome. He was a problem for that first half. And then Miami did a good job fronting him in the post, boxing him out a little bit more. Like, a lot of this stuff just comes down to which team plays harder. And they got Joe Mazzulla mic'd up in the second half. And he was like, hey, guys, talking to his team, the Heat, like, they turned it up and we didn't. We stayed the same. And I kind of feel like that was sort of the difference in the fourth quarter. some other adjustments that we'll get to later on. But let's get into this kitchen. Let's do these credit cookies. What kind of cookies do we have to hand out tonight? We got 10 of them, David.
Well, a big win in Boston. Let's have some Boston cream cookies. Everybody's heard of a Boston cream donut, but let's have some Boston cream donut cookies.
I'm a big fan of Boston cream donuts, by the way.
Okay,
big fan. Top 3 donut.
I think in terms of general sales.
Glazed. No, just you personally. You personally.
No, I'm not a Boston. I'm not a cream filled donut guy.
Jelly filled or just no fills?
No fills, man. Give me the old fashioned glazed cake. That's a good one.
No, glazed I think is number 1 for me. Like that Krispy Kreme kind of just glazed. That's the way to go. But I like a Boston cream donut.
Shout out Krispy Kreme. The Krispy Kreme and Coconut Grove or South Miami on US 1. That was a great place before it became a Starbucks. Oh God. Anyway, I digress.
Spent all day today in a Starbucks. Okay. Credit cookies. We got 10 of them. We're gonna start with Jimmy. I feel like let's
share the load a little bit.
Organize myself. Let's do Jimmy, Bam for sure. Kyle,
Love, Caleb,
Kevin. Yeah, Caleb needs some cookies. So I think we're just getting to let's start with 4 for Jimmy, but we might have to take some away.
Yeah, I mean, this is where it begins and ends. Like he was the best player in the game. He carried Miami. He did everything was necessary, and then when he was making the right pass to everybody, they were able to capitalize too. That's why
big Bam game.
Yeah,
big Bam game. I think we got to start with 3 cookies for him. 20 points, 13 on 13
aggressive.
Shots. I'm aggressive, or he was aggressive?
No. He was
okay,
aggressive.
Yeah, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal. Defensively, he was everywhere, and he
especially
was
in the second half.
Especially in the second half. Well, yep, exactly. He was a big reason why Robert Williams was not as impactful as he was in the first half, and then offensively, to start the first half and to start the second half, he was huge for them.
Yeah. Also 8 rebounds, all of which were monumental. A couple of which he got out muscled, or maybe he might have been fouled. I'm not going to get into that conversation, although I'm sure a lot of Heat fans felt that way. But he was outsized by Robert Williams, and he was trying his best. Even if he wasn't able to corral the rebound, he had a couple of jump ball situations, diving the floor. Also finished with 5 assists. So we saw the scoring, aggressive Bam Adebayo. We saw the playmaking Bam Adebayo. We saw a guy who helps.
A couple times where Boston would double him late in the shot clock after he dribbled it 2 or 3 times, and he made the right play. He had a couple of dump off passes. That one great pass in transition. I can't remember who he found cutting at the basket off the top of my head, but it was a great pass. He was awesome. And defensively, it's just, you can't say enough about what it is that he does. So we went with 3 cookies for him, which means we have 7 cookies handed out. Yeah, let's go 1 each. 1 for Kevin Love. Yeah. His rebounding in the second half was better than the rebounding in the first half. I thought the second half in general was way better. Made a couple of threes, including that wide open one on the 2-on-1, which was huge to keep Miami on that run in that third quarter. And then an outlet pass during that same run to Max Strus over Marcus Smart. And when you were getting just a couple of things like that from Kevin Love in the middle of the game, the Heat just feel like they go to a whole other level, right? When they just steal a few, 4 to 6 points, with those outlet passes
against the Knicks,
those trailing 3-pointers, that can mean the world in a playoff game.
Yeah, that was the one where it kind of felt like at that point, obviously Miami was down 9 at the half, but then the start of the third quarter, they have a little bit more fire to them. And there's that one trailer where you mentioned just now, he's I forgot who was bringing the ball up, but they kicked it open to Love, who was at the top of the key, and he just kind of steps right into the 3-pointer, confident, fluid, no second guessing. Nothing but money, just straight through the net, and you could tell, okay, maybe he's got a little bit of juice to him. He winds up hitting another one, winds up getting a little bit more active, pulling down those rebounds. Really, really strong third quarter. Just a big part of that overall comeback, and he did a fairly good job defensively too. I think he was outclassed, but I think he gave
in the second half. It was much better than the first half, and I think that was a big part of Miami kind of tightening things up. Yeah. Last we got 2 more. 1 to Kyle Lowry. We already discussed him. And then I think the final one goes to Max Strus. 6 of 10 overall, 3 of 5 from 3-point range, 3 rebounds, plus 15 in the game, 15 points. Spacing the floor was really important. I thought it was just a really good, solid, he made the shots, and on a night where it feels like the Duncan Robinson might not get a lot of minutes in this series, which is going to make Max Strus's job even more important in terms of making threes. So I'll hear arguments on Gabe Vincent or Caleb Martin. We only have one Boston cream donut cookie thing left. All three of them to me are deserving. But if I had to pick one, I think I would go Max or Gabe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, Gabe had solid shots in the fourth. So did Caleb. I mentioned that 3-pointer
was
before.
really important.
Yeah, and then Max, did a pretty solid job overall. I think he got called for a couple of ticky-tack fouls, but whatever, we can't hold that against him. Just 5 of 8 in that third quarter for 13 points, a big part of that comeback as well.
Yeah,
just they seem to turn it on at different points. You never know if you're going to get a strong first quarter from Max or a big third quarter. I like the point you made about Duncan, although I think he wasn't bad. Like I really actually. Strangely enough, I like Duncan's off-ball impact. Like he wasn't hitting his shots. He only wound up taking 2 3-pointer attempts in 7 minutes of play, but he was doing some good things defensively. He locked up Malcolm Brogdon at one point, drew a foul on somebody. He had some
he was
really
at the top
solid
of that zone when the Heat went in zone a little bit.
It wasn't bad. He wasn't hitting his threes, and you got to go with a hot hand. You go with Max again, who he wound up caught fire in the third quarter. Why wouldn't you continue to play him if he's feeling that?
And then and Lowry too. The Heat went with some double Gabe Vincent, Kyle Lowry lineups when they were on the court at the same time, which they kind of gotten away from when Duncan plays more minutes. So, shout outs, cookies all around. We alluded to the defense tightening up in the second half. What was the big adjustment that Eric Spoelstra made at halftime? We're going to tell you what that is next here on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're going to be back on Saturday morning with a recap of Game 2. You can reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram. You can email us lockedonheat@gmail.com. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions on Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. This one comes from Brian, who writes in, what was the big change the Heat made in the second half to cut down the points in the paint? David, we mentioned before, but in case you missed it, 40 points in the paint in the first half for Boston. I think it was 10 or something like that in the second half for the Celtics. We could probably check that.
I'll check it right now.
Yeah,
so I'll check it.
The big adjustment was, so going into this game, it was clear that Miami is going to switch everything. And I think what stuck out to me was not just straight switching, but the fact that they were showing on those ball screens, right? So every time that Boston brought Kevin Love's guy into the mix or whatever, Kevin Love was going to show pretty aggressively on the ball screen and then try to get back and recover, right? The show and recover, right? This is classic Chris Bosh Big Three era style ball screen defense. And the Celtics, for their credit, they took Miami's aggressiveness and used it against them. They turned it around. When Kevin Love would show, or whoever, I'm not trying to pick on Kevin Love, I'm just using him as an example, would show against that ball screen, somebody would go backdoor into that open area before Kevin Love had a chance to get back and recover. And that's why the Celtics were getting so many points in the paint. Well, I wondered at halftime, is Spoelstra going to come out and keep running this aggressive showing style switching scheme? Or do you just kind of maybe drop a little bit more, not hedge as aggressively as you do against those screens? And the answer was no. He was going to keep showing because he knew that at their best, and Spo says this all the time, the Heat at their best are creating turnovers, right? They're creating chaos on the defensive end. And that's a way to do that is you're kind of jumbling up those passing lanes, crowding those windows. The big change was what they did on the backside, right? It's just being a little bit more timely with the recoveries, being a little bit more engaged on the recoveries, sharper, and then the backside rotations, helping your teammates and all that kind of stuff. I thought it was just so much better in that second half.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. By the way, 22 points in the second half, 22 points in the paint for Boston in the second half to 40 in the first half. So noticeably different game. Yeah, just there was a sharp rotations. I think they were doing a little bit better at being physical too, because when they were off ball, I think they could do a little better, kind of just either you're not necessarily boxing out, but at least keeping the body in front so that you can mitigate some of those backdoor cuts. And I think that was pretty effective. They were able to just kind of mud up a lot of what Boston's offense in the first half had been. You didn't see so many of those backdoor cuts, and a lot of that help and rotation, forcing those turnovers. I wish we could get let's see, total turnovers for Boston in the second half, 10. So 10 in the second half.
A lot of fronting from Jimmy and Bam, specifically on Robert Williams. And when they were fronting, I think Bam and Jimmy both had caused a turnover, a deflection, each in that second half when they were doing that. Let's go to our next question from Bert, who writes in, Does Bam need to play more minutes going forward in this series? Bam tonight, 37 minutes, and was out for the beginning stretch of that fourth quarter when the Celtics made a little bit of their comeback push there. Do you think that Jimmy played the entire second half in this one, David? Are we getting to the point now where maybe even in game 2, coming off of a win, the Cody Zeller minutes were not great? I thought he had a hard time sort of keeping up with Boston's bigs. He wasn't closing out on them. Those guys like to get to move around on the floor, and he had a kind of hard time chasing them. Yep. Is this going to be a situation where Bam has to basically play entire second halves if Jimmy's going to play entire second halves?
I don't think he can afford it. I'd love to see it. I think if he can play more of those second half minutes, he probably would. But I feel like he's done so much, especially like during that third quarter run when they were having that kind of historic level of offense. We should point. I don't know if we did throughout the course of the show so far. Playoff best, 46 points in that third quarter. Like they've never had that good a quarter ever. So a big difference from the third quarter that a lot of Heat fans can point to over the course of the regular season. But, Bam was so effective. He does so much, bringing the ball up, etc. Not to say that Jimmy doesn't do those things, but I don't know. Maybe his style of defense probably is a little bit more taxing than what Jimmy does in terms of,
it is. And Bam's the one that's got he's got to bang bodies with Robert Williams, Al Horford, and all these guys. Like Jimmy doesn't have to do that to that degree. Not on an every possession basis. Yeah. Look, I also have no problem with playing Cody Zeller in this game. I will have a problem if they're playing him a lot more in this series, but I think it's game 1. You got to see if he can hold up. Right. And Spo
is Haywood Highsmith not an option? Like I know he's undersized.
Cody Zeller point, he played 9 minutes. Okay. He played like a 4 to 5 minute stint in each half. Spo, it's game 1. You go out there and see if Cody Zeller can hold up. It's clear he cannot, but I don't have a problem with Spo trying it twice in this game. It was 2 different stints. I have no problem with Spo trying it. To your point, though, maybe it probably isn't Cody Zeller's series, and maybe it is somebody like Haywood Highsmith. We did see a Kevin Love at center lineup in this game. Do they have to go to more of that for when Bam is off the court? And if that's the case, are there minutes available to Haywood Highsmith? But at the same time, they only played, outside of some 2 Cody Zeller stints and a Duncan Robinson stint, 7 guys in this game. So maybe there's a chance here where you don't even have to bring in a Haywood Highsmith, and you can just sort of stick to a 7-man rotation, especially in the second half if you're going to have Bam play the entire second half. So maybe that's
I offer. I mean, look, Mazzola did the same thing. He didn't play Grant Williams, which is a little surprising. A lot of Celtics fans on Twitter. I saw Wino Grant. He was so effective last season. It seems like he's just out of the rotation completely. But I wonder if he comes in there.
Yo-yoed around the rotation from Mazzola all season. There's something
maybe
going on there.
Yeah, maybe you bring in Highsmith on that situation because he won't be so oversized. You could put him on Williams, and I think that's a matchup that he will handle. Yeah, he can handle it because he's strong enough, physical enough, or
got the wingspan
physicality. Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to look out.
I think we're going to see, especially in the first half, some token minutes for even Cody Zeller. I don't think we've seen the last of Cody Zeller in this series. I just think that you don't have that many great options. No. Maybe there's some Haywood Highsmith minutes. Maybe there's some Cody Zeller minutes. It wouldn't surprise me if Spo did say, okay, let's just go super small and put Highsmith at center and just see what happens. Like maybe not in game 2, but at some point in the series. Like I'm pretty sure this is going to be a long series at this point. You know what I mean? Like the Celtics are too good for them to just do this every game. And we've seen this in their series. Like they're kind of up and down. They're going to look like unbeatable in one of these games. They're going to, right? They're going to make every shot. They're going to kind of look like what the Heat did in the second half and in that third quarter for an entire game because they're capable of that. So this is going to be a long series. We're going to see a lot of different things, but already in that game 1, there was so much interesting stuff from that, just from an X's and O's perspective, from a Jimmy Butler or Jayson Tatum perspective. I'm psyched for this series and for the Heat to start this thing 1-0 again, man, just winning a game 1 on the road again for the 3rd time in these playoffs. Every series in these playoffs, the Heat have stolen game 1 on the road. Phenomenal, incredible stuff, and just adding to their historic run.
Yeah, I mean, I said the map to the NBA Finals kind of followed the same thing we've seen against the Knicks too. He's got to steal game 1, put the pressure on Boston. We've seen that they can wither a little bit in the moment, and I think we saw that in the second half in particular. And regardless of what happens in game 2, as much as you'd like to win 2 straight, that seems really, really unlikely because now Boston is certainly feeling the pressure of that. And then you can come back home where you're 5-0 in the playoffs. If you can get those 2 games locked up, I mean, that's a little bit down the road. Doesn't hurt to look ahead, but you kind of focus on a moment. For now, though,
I'll say this, though.
Test again.
I think going into game 1, I said the last thing the Celtics want is for the Heat to catch fire and get confident from 3-point range, right? And that's kind of what happened. I don't expect them to shoot 52% for the rest of the series, but certainly a better start than it was to that Knicks series, right? And they're going to need to shoot like this, or again, maybe not 52% necessarily, but they're going to have to shoot closer to this than they did it against the Knicks to close the series out. But we got a lot of games left to play in this one.
Jimmy made that point in practice over the last couple of days that they were going to need to play near perfect level of basketball because obviously Boston's a pretty good team. Yeah. I don't know that they did it today. Like, again, there was a really bad first half, especially in the second quarter. And then it was a really good third quarter to kind of balance it out. And then there were still moments there where they didn't capitalize as much as you could put the blame. And I know a lot of Celtics fans will look mostly to the fact that Boston played poorly down the stretch over the fact that Miami just wound up playing really, really well.
Takes 2 to tango, man. There's 2 teams on that court. Boston did play like garbage in that second half. You've got to be disappointed with your Celtics.
Miami's good enough to capitalize on those kinds of opportunities, and they have been.
The Heat didn't get shook. The Celtics did. What does Spo always say? The playoffs about who blinks first. The Celtics blinked in this one. The Heat didn't. Does it matter if the Celtics won 3 of the 4 quarters?
Did you see Joe Mazzulla actually said that in the post-game press conference?
Way.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. They won 3 quarters, Wes, including the 4th.
So do the Heat even have a 1-0 lead? Like, does this even count?
I don't know. Maybe you can file an appeal to the
Boston
league
sports
office.
Media. They probably will. Danny Ainge, I know he doesn't work there anymore, but he's going to complain to the league office for some reason. All right. Turns out the Heat did have a 1-0 lead in this series. We're going to be back Saturday morning with a recap of Game 2. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Like us. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. David, thanks for joining me.
You got it. No Celtics sweep. Sorry.